We're going to finish Lamentations today, though. It has been an interesting series, learning about grief from a biblical perspective. And we have defined grief, to lament for our pain and sorrow, our sufferings, in this way. To biblically grieve is to express our pain to God in faith. Meaning this, that we acknowledge the hardship, the struggles, the difficulties of this life, but we also still put our faith in God. That through all of it, God is going to do something, even if we don't know what that is. And the author of Lamentations is exactly there. He is expressing the fact that he knows why certain things happen because Israel sinned against God. He also understands that some of it, he doesn't know why God is allowing it. Why did the young men and women have to be exiled? Why did so many have to die because of this? Yes, they sinned. They acknowledge that part. But also, there's some of it that he doesn't understand. And so he has that structure that he's working through chapters 1 through 4. But before we get into it, I really kind of thought about this one. As we came to the last chapter, the last part of Lamentations, I started thinking, isn't it interesting how certain people, some of us, most of us today, like to have it all together? Did you know anyone who seems to have all their life together? They just seem all put nice and tidy and everything's neat. Their marriage is great. Their kids are well behaved. Their career is moving in the right direction. And it just, from the outside looking, it just seems like they have it. Whatever it is, we can't define it, but they have it, and that is cool. We wish we were that way, that our life was that well off. Then I started thinking, why is it, especially for Christians, do we think that that's the image we have to have? To be a good Christian, our marriage has to be good. Our children have to be well-behaved and still living in the faith. That our finances and our, we don't deal with troubles of this everyday life because we are so heavenly mindset that we're focused on God, worshiping God all the time. Yes, amen. That's not a real picture. That's not what we are supposed to do. Christians are not fine all the time. We have difficulties in this life. Jesus said that in this lifetime, you will have trouble. So why do we think that we have to have this perfect life in order to be a good Christian? That is not what the Bible teaches. And that's part of what Lamentations is trying to draw out here, is the fact that an entire book, first of all, deals with the darkness of this life in Lamentations. But not only that, it ends in such a way that not everything is perfect. Everything is still in kind of a shamble. Everything's still messed up. Lamentation ends by being honest about the frustrations and refusing to pretend that everything is okay. So let's read. I want to read the ending of Lamentations chapter 5. Don't worry, we're not completely skipping. I'll give you a rundown of chapter 4, but let's get to the end of chapter 5 for today. Verse 15 starts off, "Joy has left our hearts. Our dancing has turned into mourning. The crown has fallen off of our heads. Woe to us, for we have sinned. And because of this, our heart is sick. Because of these, our eyes grow dim. Because of Mount Zion, which lays desolate and has jackals prowling in it. You, Lord, are enthroned forever. Your throne endures from generation to generation. So why do you continually forget us? Abandon us for our entire lives. Lord, bring us back to yourself so we may return, renewing our days as in former times, unless you have completely rejected us and are intensely angry with us. So just as a reminder, Lamentations is written when Israel has been completely destroyed. Everything is in ruin. Everything is overgrown. Everything is in shambles. The people are in exile or they're dead. Very few people remain, and the poet is one of them. And he is there seeing all this with this grief that is overwhelming him. And he's trying to process it. And that's where the book of Lamentations is. He's going through it and he's working his way through the grief. But he's still struggling with it because the place of his worship, the temple, is destroyed. And those that are left behind are isolated and struggling. They're devastated because of the judgment or the circumstances that led to this. In Lamentations chapter 5 is a prayer that expresses regret for all that has happened, but it also is a plea for grace. We're calling this series Grace in Grief because throughout all of this, God is demonstrating his grace even in the hardship. And so, Lamentations chapter 4, okay, let's back up a little bit. Chapter 1 through 4 are all written in the Hebrew alphabet as a poem. So they take one letter of the alphabet and write a couple lines of a poem to express the grief. And so that's what he does, chapters 1 through 4. And chapter 4 is, again, he returns to that. Chapter 3, we talked about last week, was the turning point, where he says, nevertheless, your mercies are new every day. And so I look to you for that. And then chapter 4, if you read, he returns to seeing how bad things actually are. It gets pretty graphic on some of them, talking about how the children and the young men and women are being treated in these foreign countries, about how unsanitary the conditions are in Jerusalem. And so he's talking about it, and he's still trying to work through the alphabet to give him some structure. You know, when we're in our grief, we need to have some type of structure. Because grief is so powerful that we can forget to eat. We can forget to sleep. We can forget to take our medicines. We can forget to do simple tasks. And we don't feel like even getting up and getting dressed. But yet those things are the things that will help us through our grief. Not get over it, but will give us a structure to keep us anchored in this life, to where grief doesn't crush us and keep us down forever. So doing those simple things like the poet working through the alphabet, like getting up and taking a shower and putting on clean clothes. A simple thing of keeping a mealtime, a regular mealtime, will help with the grief. Not eliminate it, but just give you structure in that grief. And that's where Lamentations kind of shows us how to do that. But then we get to chapter 5, and this is not structured. Chapter 5 is not a poem using the Hebrew alphabet. It is just the pure cry of the poet. The anguish, this frustration, all of the emotions to go along with the grief, he is just pouring out, just raw. He's reached the end of his rope trying to figure out how to deal with this. So for 4 chapters, and we really don't know how long this actually took for the poet. This could have been years that the poet was working through these things. And then finally he gets to the point, I don't know what else to do, God, so here is where I'm at. Here's where my frustration is. And he cries out to God. Verse 15 and 16 are kind of gut punch. This is when he has that aching inside of him and he is so overwhelmed with the thought of these things. And he says, joy has left our hearts. The crown has fallen off of our head. We don't see beauty anymore. We don't see anything to be happy about. There is no good in this life. Even ice cream can't fix this problem. You know, ice cream can fix a lot of grief. But the poet is saying, I'm at the end of my rope and it hurts. The things I want in this life, joy and beauty and order, none of it makes sense anymore. And then verse 20 is the question that he cries out to God. Why do you continually forget us and abandon us for the entire life? Why is it, God, that you have forgotten us? You have abandoned us. Are you even here, God? And I've heard so many people cry out in their time of grief, where are you, God? Are you even here? Notice that God, throughout all of Lamentations, God does not answer in here. A lot of other places, when people are crying out in grief, God answers. Elijah, in his frustration up on the mountain, and he cries out, and God, woe is me. Woe is me because of this crazy lady who's chasing me and all the bad things that are happening in my life. Woe to me. And God says, what are you doing here? Reading through Lamentations, you kind of think God would say something like that. Why are you sitting in rubble and in shame like this? Why are you sitting here? But God doesn't do that. And with David, when he was suffering grief, he was crying out, and God would come to him and speak to him. Send a prophet even to give him instructions. God doesn't give instructions in Lamentations. God doesn't answer any of the cries of the poet. But yet we can see God's grace through it all if we look. The Bible here in its own way through Lamentations is basically saying that we have permission to feel the weight of our grief without shame. It doesn't give us an answer to fix all of it. It is saying, in your grief, what you are feeling, it's okay. Now, I want to unpack that a little bit more, because to say it's okay, there are certain things it's not okay for us to do, but there's a lot of grace in this that says it's okay for you to feel this way. It's okay for you to share your frustrations. It's okay to ask these questions, to do these things, because your God cares for you, even in the hard times. So it's okay when things are unclear. It's okay when they're difficult and hard. It's okay when it doesn't even make sense. And so today I want you to hear that it's okay not to be okay. That's where the poet is at. Chapter 5, he has gone through the processes, he's gone through the steps, and he's basically saying, okay, I've done this 4 different times now. I've gone through, I've written down my thoughts, I've organized them, I've intentionally given myself structure, but it's not okay. And so chapter 5, he's like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to pour out what's in my heart, what's in my mind, what's going on in my life. I'm going to pour it out. I'm going to just lay it all out there. And the Bible is saying it's okay not to be okay. We don't have to have the polished version, the good Christian version of ourselves on display all the time. It's okay to say, you know what? This week I had a hard time seeing God in anything. That's what the poet here is saying. I look to Mount Zion. I look to the temple. I see all I see are jackals. I see it overgrown. I see all this and I don't see the goodness of God in it, but yet I believe that God, you are enthroned forever. You are still on your throne. You are still supreme. You still have something that you are doing, but I'm not okay right now. You ever been there? I know I have. I've been there a couple of times. I'm like, God, this is not okay with me. What's going on in my life? I don't like it. And God listens to us. He hasn't abandoned us. He hasn't given up on us. He is listening to our cries. The Israelites did not walk away from God when everything was not okay. And as a matter of fact, because things were not okay, they actually turned their eyes to God. They said, God, this is all this trouble around us. Where are we going to look but to you? Let us fix our eyes on him and move towards him. In our grief, that is one of the things. When we're not okay, and it doesn't make sense, we don't feel like showing up for worship, we don't feel like reading our Bibles, the one thing that we should not abandon is just that. I loved what Joe said. Because he was probably thinking of all the songs in a minor key that would make us sad. But that's not who Joe is. So he's like, you know what? Let's just praise God even though we're not happy about it. And those are still praises. That's still worship that God accepts. He doesn't ask us to get our lives cleaned up before we come to worship. He says, come in, all you who are weary. Come in, all you who are troubled, and you will find grace here. So it's okay to not be okay. This is not, we've done a study and we know that there are times when there's a crisis of belief, a crisis of faith. That's not what this is. This is actually the prayer in Lamentations chapter 5 is a prayer of faith in crisis. See, a crisis of faith means that we've hit rock bottom, and that was earlier on in Lamentations. We hit rock bottom, we have these problems in our lives, and we start wondering, God, is it even worth it? God, what good is my faith doing right now? Do I even believe in you at this moment? That's a crisis of belief. And there's a point to that I could talk to you about that. Crisis of belief serves a purpose. But Lamentations chapter 5 is the opposite of that in the way this is a prayer of faith in crisis. The circumstances are solidifying it, saying, no, even though my life is crumbling around me, I choose to believe in God. Even though I think that God has abandoned me, I choose to put my faith in Him. Even though I wonder what God is trying to do through all of this, I will trust in Him. So this is a prayer of faith in crisis. In Lamentations chapter 5, they cry out. Lamentations chapter 4, he sees all the troubles in this life. And Lamentations chapter 5, he just says, you know what? The only one who can deal with this is you, God. All the problems that I see in this life, all the frustrations, all the terrible things, it was like he was, in chapter 4, he was watching the 5 o'clock news. Have you ever noticed that? 5 o'clock news, there's like nothing good inside of a 5 o'clock news report. Even the weather somehow sounds bad during 5 o'clock news. They can say that it's going to be sunshine and wonderful weather, but somehow it still, you anticipate, okay, when's the next storm coming? Now at the 4 o'clock news, you probably do think, okay, that's great. 5 o'clock news, somehow everything shifts. And so chapter 4 is the 5 o'clock news, and chapter 5 is like, you know what? I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to pray. I'm just going to pray and cry out to God, to a God who has given promises that if I would turn to Him, He would hear my prayers. That if I would ask for forgiveness, He would forgive my sins and wash me clean. Give me a new slate. But here's the point. To go along with the whole idea that it's okay not to be okay. In your crisis, in your grief, in your frustrations, if you are crying out to God, that is proof of your faith. Because you're not going to cry out to someone you don't believe is even there. You're going to cry out to the one who has proven Himself over and over again. So God listens to our cries when we're not okay. And see, God is okay with this. Psalms chapter 34, He says this, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in their spirit. Doesn't that describe grief pretty well? And the promise is that God is with you. He has not abandoned you. So not only is it okay to not be okay, it is okay to bring your questions to God. To bring those questions, and the way that He says this in chapter 5, He says, have you abandoned us for our entire lives? This is a question not where they're doubting God, but it is more relational. God, I need you close to me. So where are you? I need to feel you. I need to know that you are here. It's not one where He's saying, God, I think that you've lost control of this situation in my life. That's not what He's saying. He's saying, God, it feels like you have abandoned me. It feels like you are gone and I need you near to me. I need to be close to you, God. It's the same type of questions that Job brings. He says this, he says, God, why have you hid your face from me? The psalmist wrote this, God, why have you abandoned me? Even Jesus Himself on the cross cried out, my God, why have you abandoned me? And this is not one where God has just vanished. He's disappeared from the circumstances. It's one where, God, why aren't you close to me right now? I don't feel you. So bring your questions to God. Bring your frustrations to God. It's okay to have these. I know not a lot of churches give you permission to be frustrated with God. But the Bible does. The Bible says all these people have been frustrated and been troubled, but yet they did one thing and they still called to God. They asked their questions. They brought their questions to God, and God is not threatened by these. God has no problem with us asking questions in our time of grief and sorrow or frustration. As long as you are still asking God these questions, that means that you are still in the conversation with God. And that's exactly where we need to be. To still be in a mode of prayer, talking to God. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to bring your questions. It's okay to even not understand what is happening. Verse 17, he says, our hearts are sick, our eyes grow dim. I don't know what's happening inside of me. I don't know what's happening around me. God, I don't understand any of this. I'm sure none of you have ever been in that kind of situation. You're the ones that have it all together, right? No. When we don't understand, we still come to God. And there's no tidy explanation. There's no putting a bow on this saying, this is why it's happening. It's not even like in Jeremiah. You know, the famous verse in Jeremiah is 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for your good and for your future. Do you know when Jeremiah is declaring that? It's in the middle of another situation just like this. It's in this situation exactly. The temple has been destroyed. Jerusalem is in rubble. And Jeremiah is reminding everybody, God has a plan for our future. We don't understand why this is happening, but there is a future. In your grief, in your sorrow, in your troubles, every day that you wake up is a sign that God still has a plan for you. Every day that you get to move means God has somewhere for you to go. So it's okay not to understand what's going on. And Israel's cry, the poet's cry in Lamentations chapter 5, reminds me of even the Father's cry to Jesus. When the Father said, I do believe, but help my unbelief. That needs to be our cry during the middle of grief and sorrow and suffering and hardships. God, I believe in you, but I need you to help my unbelief because I don't see how you're using this. I don't see where you're moving right now. God, I don't understand. The faith does not require you to have it all figured out. Faith doesn't have some nice little slogan that you can just put on your wall or Facebook page or use it as like a greeting card just with a nice little saying that says, everything will get better from here. Faith doesn't require that. Faith doesn't even demonstrate that. what it does tell us is that we can sit with God not knowing what tomorrow brings. We can sit in faith when we're not sure that there's even anything worth living for. Because God has still given us breath. God has still given us today. So it all comes down to this. I've told you there are things that it's okay for us to do, but what it's not okay for us to do is to run from God. To turn our backs on God. It's not okay for us to abandon God because we feel like He's abandoned us. So the last thing that the poet here is telling us is it's okay to ask God these things. To seek God when it feels like He can't even be found. It's okay for us to pursue God and chase after Him when it feels like He's playing hide and go seek. But it's not okay for us to give up on God. It's not okay for us to turn around and say, God, you know what? I'm going to forget it all. Best for me just to eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow I'm probably going to die. No. Even if that is the case, life doesn't end when we die. Our faith in God gives us hope. That's why in verse 21, the prayer that kind of ends all of this grief and all of this, it does not end in a way that we know the end of the story based on Lamentations. We can find it elsewhere in history and in the rest of Scripture. We can know what God does to bring them back. But here in Lamentations, the poet just sits with this and he says in verse 21, Lord, bring us back to yourself so we can return. Renew our days. Restore us. Bring us back to you again, God. We come to you and we need you. So this book, while it never lets us hear from God directly, and it doesn't resolve itself to help us feel good about our situation, our troubles, our grief, our pain. It doesn't do any of that. What it does do is say God is there even when He is silent. God is with you even when things are falling apart. God has not abandoned you. Even though it feels like it, because the way it finishes in verse 22, unless you have completely forgotten us, unless you completely rejected us. But somewhere the poet, while that is what he's feeling, he knows because of verse 21, he says, bring us back to yourself. Restore us, renew us. Give us back our faith. We know, and the prayer here is that God would restore to them their former joy and their former glory, to see the beauty of Jerusalem once again. That is their prayer. But even if it were to be put back, things would never be the same again. In our grief, whether we've lost a job, we've lost a home, relationships have been destroyed, maybe we've lost a loved one, things will never be the same. Even when they do feel like they get back to a normal, it's not going to be the same. But we can still pray for that. We can still ask God for that. But bigger picture is this, and what the poet is actually saying. God, in all of this, with all of my life in kind of a mess, bring me back to a right relationship with you. That's what's going to make this work. That's what's going to make this better. So this honest prayer of hurt, this honest prayer of frustration and grief is the only version of us that can actually be healed. Because if we're not honest about where we're at, God's going to remain quiet and silent. Because he's saying, you're not ready to be healed yet. Till you can be honest with where you're actually at. So, while it is okay to not be okay, I want you to know there is grace in our grief. There is grace to be experienced. And in order to experience that grace, we need to stop pretending that everything is just fine and dandy. We need to stop walking into church on Sundays and putting on a face and then someone asking, well, how are you doing? Oh, I'm just fine. When inside you're screaming out, I hurt, I'm aching. That's where a lot of people were at this morning. I heard from so many that shared their struggles this week. Maybe they're not feeling well, or something is happening in their life that they don't like, they don't understand. Those are the things we need to be honest about. Because until we are honest with them, until we stop pretending that everything is okay, we're not going to really cry out to God. Which is the next thing, is we need to stop running from God. Stop thinking that God is the problem. God's not the problem, God's the solution. So run to God. But here's the other thing. Stop needing everything to be explained to you. There are some things in this life that you are never, ever going to understand. It's okay not to be okay with those. But don't let that interrupt your faith. So, the invitation today is this. Be honest with God with where you're at. Express to Him your frustrations. If you don't bring it to God, where are you going to take it? Most people are going to internalize it and make it worse. Which, that's the next invitation, is be honest with yourself. You know, this is one of those things. Healing never takes place just because you fake it. You know the saying, fake it until you make it? That doesn't work with healing from grief. So be honest with God, be honest with yourself, and cry out to God. Ask God to restore, to renew, to be close to you again.